Hello everybody and welcome to That's Football. Wow, Neymar to Newcastle this summer transfer window. Let's talk about that, because I tell you what, if you'd have said to me Neymar to Newcastle even 18 months ago, I think there would have been more chance of Boris Johnson marrying Margot Robbie. There'd have been more chance of Sam Allardyce managing Leeds. And that's actually happened. And look, Neymar to Newcastle could actually happen as well. What is this all about? And is this the next stage of super wealth that we've all predicted for Newcastle? Well, let's get into it, because Neymar is in a bad place with PSG at the moment. You might have seen what's been going on in Paris this week. Very, very frustrated / angry Paris Saint-Germain fans protesting outside Neymar's house, protesting out the stadium about Messi. Look, it's interesting what PSG's next plan is once Neymar and Messi are removed from the club, if they're removed from the club, because surely Mbappe's got to go at some point. So, but that's PSG's problem. Would Neymar at Newcastle happen, and would it be a good fit? Well, the honest answer is, I think this. The first thing that comes to my mind is Robinho to Manchester City all those years ago, where he thought he was signing for United and he signed for City. And at that point, Man City were not the team they are now. It was early days. It was, sporadically buying these players just to try and become relevant. And ultimately, they did become relevant, but I think they made mistakes and learnt along the way. Signing Neymar when you're in the Champions League already is a logical next step for Newcastle, and it's a big next step. Personally, I look at some of the people they're scouting, like Hadara at Leipzig and Szoboszlai at Leipzig, and I look at those types of players and I go, they're really interesting players for Newcastle to bring in, because they're talented players going from Leipzig to Newcastle into the Champions League. Neymar from PSG to Newcastle instantly has an issue. Newcastle isn't Paris. Newcastle isn't Paris Saint-Germain, and Neymar, as we know, does pick up the odd injury, does fancy a trip back to Brazil in early March, and what's the game going to Newcastle? You could never deny any Newcastle fan wanting Neymar, but how comfortable would they be with Neymar's motives, and how motivated would be Neymar at Newcastle in the Champions League? If you can tick those boxes, I still believe that Neymar's in the top 5 players in the world. So why would you not do that? But obviously the big scary thing would be, is he just coming here for a massive pay packet? Is he going to be, 100% committed? Is he going to be available for more than 50% of the season? And when he is available, is he going to work hard in a league that he's never played in before, where it is 38 games a season that you have to turn up? You have to turn up against Brentford as much as you have to turn up at Old Trafford. Those would be the key things. Neymar United would probably be what Newcastle get renamed as. So there are issues there, but I'm not being arrogant towards Newcastle here. These are the same issues if Neymar came to Manchester United. It's the same issues if he went to Liverpool. It's the same issues if he went to Arsenal. All right, Man United, Arsenal and Liverpool are more traditionally big names, and maybe Neymar would be more attracted by that, whereas Newcastle's new money. But that can work. We've seen it with Haaland at Man City. We've seen it at De Bruyne, Aguero over the years. It'd be very interesting. I personally think Newcastle won't do it. I think this is just the world Newcastle operate in now, where they've got the wealth and they've got Champions League football. There's nothing else for them to do, really. Yes, I think if you can start to consistently go deep in the Champions League and win the Premier League, then that makes you even more attractive to the star players of the world. But ultimately, if you can offer the Champions League and it's sustainable, like if Spurs wanted Neymar and they'd got Champions League football last year and they had the money, I think he'd say, well, you probably won't get it next year. Whereas I think Newcastle can say, look, we ain't going anywhere. We're the richest club in the world. We're in the Champions League. We're never dropping out. This is our plan for the summer and we want you in it. I don't think that's a concern. It's more about, whether he fancies Newcastle, whether he fancies that type of a move in the Premier League. And he'd have to be ridiculously motivated and concentrated on, being part of that project. And which is why I don't think Newcastle will do it. And I don't think Eddie Howe will do it. Ultimately, the power play at Newcastle I'm not too aware about, but they seem to support their coaching and their recruitment. They brought in the Brighton guy who was head of recruitment. Is he likely to say Neymar's the one to go for? I don't think that's the Newcastle model. I think the scary thing about the Newcastle model is their recruitment is actually really intelligent. The players that they bring in tend to be players that are operating 10, 20, 30% below their potential. Then they come into Newcastle and they go up. Look at Gomes, look at Dan Burn, look at Trippier. Look at the players that have improved, which is why I think they're going to go more for the Hadaras, the Sabozlis, people like that, than the Neymars or, Benzema do you want a year at Newcastle. I mean, I might be completely wrong, and there's nothing wrong with getting Benzema or Neymar in, because if you get them, focused, they're fantastic players. But I'm not so sure that's what Newcastle are going to do. I look at this Newcastle summer transfer window and I'm massively intrigued by it. I mean, I think it's going to be a really interesting summer transfer window anyway, and I can't wait to react to them all on That's Football over the summer. But I think Newcastle are one for me that's daunting, but fascinating, because they've not gone down that route of superstars, which may be what Man City did and made mistakes from. I think they've got a lot of money, but I think they've got a lot of intelligence around what they want to build. That doesn't mean that that's sustainable. That doesn't mean that they'll always be like that. That doesn't mean that an owner might be tempted to say, why aren't we signing Neymar? Why are you going for some French striker from the French league who's 22? That might not be the appetite of the owner. But if they stay the course of what they've done in the last 18 months, I think they'll swerve a Neymar and go for something that's more long term, that fits in with the mentality they've got there, because Newcastle are such a hard working side. They're ridiculously hard working. That's why their home form is so good. That's why their away form is so good. Look at PSG. Would you say PSG are a hard working side with the front three of Neymar, Messi and Mbappe? They're not. And if you give Newcastle Neymar, Mbappe and Messi, I'm telling you now, hot take or not, they're not going to have as good a season in the Premier League, because you're going to lose that intensity from your front three that Newcastle have. It's a fascinating conversation, but ultimately there is a lot to be said about team over individual. And look, would you want to, and the wages and the financial package to buy Neymar is somewhere between 100 and 200 million pounds. Well, imagine you could get 3 or 4 really good, exciting talents across Europe in the Premier League for that massively improve Newcastle's squad. Be interesting. Look, Chelsea have been mentioned in relation to Neymar. I wouldn't be surprised if Man United get mentioned. There is no doubt that Neymar is a fantastic footballer, and there is no doubt that there would be a lot of interest. Does he fit the Newcastle project this summer? And those sort of questions are going to be asked. Now they've got the Champions League. You can knock on the door. Look, last summer Newcastle had money. They can't knock on Neymar's door. They can't. He ain't going to come. He's going to be, you fought off relegation. You've got a load of money. Come back to me when you've got Champions League football. Well, now they can knock on that door. The thing is, will they knock on that door? Where can I see Neymar going is a more broader question. I think he's been at PSG for too long, but I wouldn't be surprised if he stayed there if there was a big contract. Would Neymar fancy the Premier League? I don't know what it is about certain players that aren't enamoured by the Premier League. This is something that's a completely separate video, but there seems to be a certain type of player that just isn't that motivated by the Premier League. Whether it is the Lewandowskis, the Benzema's, the Neymars, the Messis. There's plenty of players out there that just seem to... I don't know whether there's an arrogance against the Premier League that, for me, if I was a footballer, it would be the league I wanted to play in. It's the most watched. It's the, you can earn the most in there. It's the most entertaining. It's the most challenging. It's the most intense. It's a bit like the 90s when it was Serie A. It's a bit like, La Liga 10 years ago. But there still seems to be quite a few top level players that aren't bending over backwards to come and play in the Premier League. So look, maybe Neymar doesn't fancy the Premier League either. Where he'd go next, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Get your comments in below. Smash a like on the video. I think there's a wider question here. I want to see what you've got to say in the comments. Would Newcastle go for Neymar? Should they go for Neymar? I personally think no and no, but I've obviously communicated that point. And do you think there is a bit of snobbery from the higher level players around the Premier League? Why do you think the higher level players don't come here in abundance? You do get the Haalands, you do get the De Bruynes, but there's not a massive influx like there was in the early 90s. Everybody wanted to play in Serie A. It is interesting. Get your comments in below. Make sure you subscribe. I'll speak to you on the next one.